What's up, guys? We're coming up on the 2025 Spring Big Bass Bash. This video going to be kind of about how I would approach it. I'm not going to be fishing it this year, and I'm just going to try and give you some tips maybe to help you catch fish, maybe cash some checks, and maybe even catch the big fish. But I'm going to do this all in one take, no stops, no nothing, no editing. It's just going to be a raw footage, quick and dirty. I'm going to get right down to business on what you need to know. So as far as the lake goes itself and the stage of the fish, I think this is going to be a pre-spawn event. I'm not saying that you won't be able to find some fish that are kind of pulled up, maybe thinking about spawning in and around those areas, most definitely, especially if you kind of are up the river area. Those fish are always ahead of what the fish are down on the lower end or further down the lake. But as far as the actual lake itself and kind of generation, water level, and all that, and water temperature, all kind of ties together. At Bagnell Dam, water temp is showing about 49, 50 degrees on the main lake. Now we got to remember that's the main lake. You can find a lot warmer water back in some creeks and stuff, and little pockets and areas like that. Especially the North Shore type stuff that's getting beat on all day with the sun. We're coming up on some warming weather here. Nice little trend that's going to be warming up that water significantly. But the water level is currently 656. It's been right around there. They basically have had Truman Dam open and then Bagnell Dam open and just running water through. Seems to be tapering off a little bit though. Generation was a little bit higher the last few days in like the 26,000-ish realm, and a little bit lower today. I think the average out to be around 13,000 tomorrow. Thursday is predicted to be about 8,500, so that's pretty minimal. And then Friday, the same thing, 8,500. And I would not predict that they would be running any water over the weekend. Typically, they end up not doing that. But you're going to have a little bit of watercolor or stain in the water throughout the lake. Obviously, the further up the river you go, the further that direction, you're going to have more color in the water than if you get down to the lower end area. It's going to have the least effect on that, but it's still going to have more color than what has been through like the winter. If you fished up here at the winter at all, we had pretty clear water, and it's definitely going to have more stain than that. So the lake is gigantic, 90 miles, and you're going to have fish just in different stages throughout the entire lake. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what's happening going on up the river. All I can tell you is that it's going to be significantly ahead of what these fish are doing on the lower end. But if I was fishing it, I would just really be focused in and around staging areas, not necessarily where the fish are actually going to be spawning, but leading into those areas. So when I say that, you can be looking at your main lake points, secondary points, and your creek channel banks and stuff that are all leading into these pockets, these cuts and stuff. As far as your main lake points go, I'd be looking for more of the bigger busted up rock and stuff. I'm basically, if you're fishing the main lake, would be looking for fish that have been out deeper and are starting to maybe make their way into these areas and try and find them, on that way in basically. And I think it would mostly be targeting these fish relatively shallow, closer to the bank, probably from being really, really shallow, like casting your bait pretty much up on the bank, out to maybe around 10 foot or so. I think that would be the zone that I would kind of focus on. And then your secondary points, kind of the same thing. Just pretend you got your secondary point that leads into a nice flat type spawn pocket. I'm going to be looking in and around that, not necessarily dialed in just on the secondary point. I mean, obviously I'm going to be, or would be looking at that, but kind of working down the shoulders a little bit. See if you want to work down the shoulders kind of to where it just keeps going down the bank, especially if there's a creek channel there, and then check on the inside leading into the little cut there. So that leads into the final thing, which is your creek channel banks themselves. You can be on the actual bank itself with a big busted up rock. You can be on the channel swings, and that's a bonus if that leads or is close to a little spawn pocket like I was talking about. So you're looking for your rock changes, and basically the same thing. Just imagine that these fish are going to be using those areas as they are moving in to spawn. That's the good thing about spring. The fish have one thing on their mind ultimately, and that's to spawn, to reproduce. And that eventually is going to trump everything else. But at this point in time, I think most of them are getting up there, starting to head shallower, get kind of in those areas, and then start to feed up because it's gonna take some energy. And then the kind of two other things I would look at too is your spawning coves, spawning areas. So your flatter stuff. Typically, it's pea gravel. Doesn't have to be necessarily at Lake the Ozarks. I feel like this is one of the lakes where the bank kind of lies to you sometimes. If it's pea gravel on the bank, you come out a little further and it's actually not the same type of rock anymore. But nonetheless, usually looking for that smaller style rock when they are spawning or getting to that area. But in and around those little cuts and coves, and it doesn't have to be a deep cove or a deep cut. It can just be 40 yards long or something that juts off to the side, even close to the main lake or something. I'm looking for brush or any type of cover that's in those guts of those little areas, or it can be an isolated dock, whatever. Anything where if a fish pulls up in there and they're not right up on the bank, where are they going to be? They're going to be in and around some sort of cover close to it, and that's what you're going to be looking for, throwing your bait to that target. Especially as you get further on into this event, you have a lot of pressure on these fish. Throwing a little bit off the shore, I think, kind of helps sometimes get some of these fish that aren't as targeted quite as much after the 10th boat has gone by. But one other thing that I think I would probably implement, or at least try and see if you're getting any bites doing it, is getting those fish that are kind of up under those docks. So same thing if you're thinking about a spawning pocket, or even could be a creek channel bank or something, and you've got some docks and you get up to the little bit shallower water there, closer to the bank, kind of behind it where the cables and all that stuff is, or on the edges, would be skipping a jig way up under there into the shadiest spot. It might be a little early for that to be really good, but like I said, you want to experiment with that a little bit. And it helps if it's sunny, obviously. That's going to target those fish, or put them in a much smaller area where you can kind of fish a little faster, because you know right where you need to put your bait, and then you can move on. So as far as your baits and what's going to work, is the tackle box is pretty much about wide open. I think the only thing you might be limited on a little bit would be top water. Not going to say you couldn't catch fish on top water, because again, this lake is huge, and especially I think if you go up the river where that water is shallower, that might come to life. And one other thing to note about the river, with it being shallower, if you want to power fish and stuff like that, and that's kind of your style, is yes, it warms up much quicker, but it also cools off much quicker when we get these little fronts. But I think as of now, the weather's looking like you're not going to have any crazy fronts that are going to put a damper on that plan. So I would start off by covering water, so using your moving baits. So you could throw your rock crawlers, you can throw crankbaits, smaller crankbaits and stuff, and kind of cover that zone. You can throw your spinner baits, things that you can run around, just cover water and figure out where you're getting some bites. If you're fishing on the lower end area where it's going to be a little bit cleaner, obviously some wind's definitely going to help you, especially with like the spinner bait and stuff. Looking for something natural on your spinner baits and stuff too, if the water's a little bit more clear and you get to kind of your more gaudy colors in that off-color water, and you throw that orange blade in and stuff, the classic Ozarks staple. But if you're looking for a good spinner bait, check out E-Factor. They're one of our sponsors, but they make fantastic spinner baits, and they also have some bigger blades. So this is just this is an older one I have, not an E-Factor, but see, his blade's not very big. The E-Factors are a little bit longer size blade, a little bit wider. They got a real good thump, and it's just a good imitation for a nice big old shad that is going to get you that big bite. But on those same banks, or same areas where I'm covering water and your channel banks and your points and all that leading into those areas, you're going to probably see some fish that are on the bottom if you have live scope and stuff, and maybe throughout the day or throughout the tournament, you're going to notice some fish may be suspending up a little bit, and that is a good time to throw a good old jerk bait down those areas. And the last time I was fishing I was throwing my jerkbait, I had to throw it almost on shore, give it 1 or 2 twitches off the bank, and that's where I was getting bites. So they're kind of in like what I call like a slot, where they are just in this window, and it seems like you can cover a fair amount of water with a jerkbait if you can kind of figure out, okay, do I need to be within 5 feet of the bank, or do I need to come off the bank a little bit further? But once you are fishing those areas, you start getting some bites, and you kind of maybe can narrow down, okay, they are, you know, on the ends of the channels, or kind of on a specific style of rock. Maybe you found, okay, they're on a bigger chunk rock, you know, in between some spawning pocket type areas. The fish are still sliding further back. You can really slow down and throw your jigs. You can throw your shaky heads. You can throw your Carolina rigs, all that. Some good jigs to throw, especially this time of the year, is these little like finesse style jigs. This particular one is actually a little Dirk's jig. I've got some that I make that are just like it, but these are nice because look how small they are. You know, the little bite-sized piece of candy basically for a fish. And this particular one is a 1/2 ounce. So I love it because these little baits, you can throw them, you can feel them, but you're still very finesse, which I think is also going to be a key with all the fishing pressure that's going on. But if you are don't have any of those, you just want to throw your regular old style jigs, 3/8, 1/2 ounce jig, whatever, flipping, skipping up under these docks, that totally works too. But one other thing, or one bait that I really like this time of the year that I pretty much just throw in the spring is the Carolina rig. And I like the Carolina rig a lot because to me, it keeps me focused, because I feel like I'm covering water, I'm doing something, but I am slowing down at the same time, if that makes sense, because you basically are just dragging it very slow. There's 2 methods. You can kind of drag it with your rod and then pick the slack back up, and then, you know, kind of drag it again and pick the slack back up, and just kind of keep doing that over and over. But I oftentimes find that I want to cast out to where I'm going, point my rod straight at my rig while it's on the ground, and I am just slowly reeling that thing, just like extremely slow, counting the rocks basically is kind of what I'm doing in my head. And to me, I have constant tension on it. I know exactly what that's doing all the time. You can tell if something's up, and you can, you know, to me, it just, I feel like I don't really miss many fish doing that. But as far as your Carolina rig, if you haven't really thrown it before, you have a weight, and then you come down, you put a bead, and then you tie a swivel on, and then from that swivel, you tie another piece of line. You can vary that length depending on the water clarity. Generally, I run like an 18 to 24 inch leader, and I'm more or less fishing in a little bit cleaner water. If you're in dirtier water, you can shorten that up to probably maybe around 1 foot or so. I won't really go any shorter than that. And then you tie your hook on, and then you put whatever bait you want on there. As far as baits go for that, I am almost always throwing a baby brush hog or a full-size brush hog. You can also put like a lizard on there. You can put some sort of shad imitator on there, you know, like a little fluke or something like that. But to me, I feel like a Carolina rig is imitating just a crawfish. You got your weight kind of stirring stuff up, and then behind it is a little piece of plastic. Looks like a little crawfish to the bass. That's what I think in my head, at least. But it's just a good bait to kind of get in areas and fan cast around and kind of cover some water. So if I go back to the example of the spawn pockets, the little flat type areas, get in there and look for a little bit deeper stuff and fan cast around those brush piles or piece of cover that you see, or maybe there's a dock that's on the point or closer to the point that's a little bit shallower. Toss that thing up there and run it along the edges. I also am probably usually throwing a 3/8 ounce weight on that if I'm fishing in 10 foot or less. If I'm fishing deeper than that, I usually put like a 1/2 ounce on. If I'm fishing even deeper, like in the 20s, then I'll put like a 3/4 ounce on. So you always want to know what's happening with that Carolina rig as you're moving it around. And one final bait that I probably have to mention is the A-rig. I'm usually so overthrowing the A-rig by now that I don't even want to get it out anymore or rig it up, but it's definitely going to account for some fish. I know that. I've had excellent days this time of the year on the A-rig as far as numbers, and have caught some big fish. So you can't say that that's not going to catch fish. And then I'm no glide bait expert. I don't even own a glide bait, but that's definitely going to account for fish. I know a lot of people have been throwing those the last couple of years at Ozarks. It's been very popular. It has accounted for definitely many checks, especially for the big bass bash style of fishing. So that is my quick and dirty rundown of the spring big bass bash. Just remember, try and figure out a little bit of a game plan of what you want to do. If you want to strictly cover water and just keep rolling and rolling and just cover as much water as you can, or if you start covering some water and get some bites and then you kind of narrow down into that one little specific area and kind of slow down and try and recreate that. Because that is one thing about Lake the Ozarks, is if you can get something going on in that little section of the lake, you can usually run a cove or two over from there and recreate the same thing and get some bites. And it's going to be extremely busy. It always is. I think there's normally around like 3,000 anglers or something, so it's normally over 1,500 boats, sometimes more, I think. So be careful out there. Use your sense, use your lights in the morning. Don't be running around without any lights on or anything like that, or driving 70 miles an hour while it's dark. Take your time, have some fun, just take it easy. I feel like that's when you are going to perform the best, fish the best, is just having a good time. Don't take it too serious. Hopefully you can cash some checks and pay for your weekend at least, and maybe even take home some big dollar bills and save up for something nice. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next video, and good luck out there during the Big Bass Bash.